Text for our sermon this morning comes from the book of Genesis, chapter 37. I'm going to begin reading at verse 2, and I'll read verses 2 through 11 and then verses 20 through 28. You can find the text printed in the bulletin. You can find it in the Pew Bible there in front of you at page 34 of the Old Testament section. Or if you have an iPad or a phone or some sort of electronic device, scripture on it, you can read it there. Those are words I never thought I would ever say, by the way. But here I am saying them. And, you know, life is long and lots of things change. Genesis chapter 37, beginning at verse 2. Joseph, being 17 years old, was shepherding the flock with his brothers. He was a helper to the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, and Joseph brought a bad report of them to their father. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any other of his children because he was the son of his old age, and he had made him a long robe with sleeves. But when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all his brothers, they hated him and could not speak peaceably to him. Once Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him even more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream that I dreamed. There we were, binding sheaves in the field. Suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright. Then your sheaves gathered around it and bowed down to my sheaf." His brothers said to him, "Are you indeed to reign over us? Are you indeed to have dominion over us?" So they hated him even more because of his dreams and his words. He had another dream and told it to his brothers, saying, "Look, I have had another dream. The sun, the moon, and 11 stars were bowing down to me." But when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, "What kind of a dream is this that you have had? Shall we indeed come, I and your mother and your brothers, and bow to the ground before you?" So his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. And now down to verse 20. "Come now, let us kill him and throw him into one of the pits. Then we shall say that a wild animal has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." But when Reuben heard it, he delivered him out of their hands, saying, "Let us not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Shed no blood. Throw him into this pit here in the wilderness, but lay no hand on him, that he might rescue him out of their hand and restore him to his father." So when Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his robe, the long robe with sleeves that he wore, and they took him and threw him into the pit. The pit was empty, there was no water in it. Then they sat down to eat, and looking up they saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead with their camels carrying gum, balm, and resin on their way to carry it down to Egypt. Then Judah said to his brothers, "What profit is it if we kill our brother and conceal his blood? Come, let us sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him, for he is our brother, our own flesh." And his brothers agreed. When some Midianite traders passed by, they drew Joseph up, lifting him out of the pit, and sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And they took Joseph to Egypt. The word of God for the people of God. Be to God. If anybody thinks that the Bible only presents ideal families, treating each other in ideal ways, doing ideal things, this story they must read. Let us pray. Lord, open our hearts and minds this day to that which you would have us to see, that which you would have us to hear. and most especially those words which would transform us so that we might more closely become and be the people that you have created us to be. And now, Lord, as I preach, may that which is from you lodge in our hearts, never to be removed, and may that which is not from you drift away from us like leaves on the wind. It is in your name that we pray. Amen. I'm the oldest of 4 sons. Each time one of us was born, my parents sort of went into a fit of creativity and really engaged their imaginations, especially when it came to naming us. And they were imaginative and they were creative, and when all 4 sons were born and all 4 sons were named, they ended up with sons named Tom, Bob, John, and Bill. That tells you a little something about the level of imagination and creativity in my family. No girls in our family, just boys. I know a little bit about growing up with brothers. I know nothing about growing up with sisters, but I know a lot about growing up with brothers, and I know a good bit about what it means to be the oldest. When you're the oldest, well, let me back up a minute. All the oldest people, siblings in their family, raise your hands. Okay, there's a lot of you out there. See if any of this rings true for you. When you're the oldest, you are somehow responsible for the others. Is that correct? I found this all the time. I was forever trying to get away from my brothers. They trailed me everywhere I went. And so I would try to sneak out of the house, and sort of just tiptoe out into the backyard for a few moments of meditation. Prayer and contemplation. That's all I was looking for. But every time my mother saw me heading for that back door, she said, "Tommy, if you're going outside, take your brothers with you." I was trying to get away from my brothers, but everywhere I went, there they were. Does that ring true for anybody? And another thing that I noticed as the oldest was that whatever they did, I was somehow responsible for. I didn't ask for that responsibility. It just somehow was conferred upon me by virtue of being the oldest. When they came home with their report cards and had D's and F's on it, I was somehow responsible for their D's and F's and my own D's and F's. I never could figure that out. It was obvious that I couldn't get my own homework done. Why was I supposed to get their homework done? Or if they were playing in the neighbor's yard and broke out the window, somehow it was me who was at fault. Or if they got in a fight, which they often did, and lost, which they often did, somehow it was my fault, and it didn't really even matter whether I was there or not. There's a lot of responsibility to being the oldest, and when you're trying to shepherd brothers, it's almost impossible. Now, my mother believed in keeping order, keeping peace, by imposing a strict discipline of order. And what that meant was that wherever we went, and we always went in a gang, we always went all together. Wherever we went, I had to go first. The oldest always went first. The youngest always went last. I thought it would have been good just every now and then to reverse that order, right? Or to start in the middle. She never did it. If you went to the barber, I got the first haircut. Went to the doctor, I got the first shot. Went to the dentist, I got drilled on first. That was never fair. I should have at least been able to see my brother squirm in agony in the dental chair before I had to get in it. It never, ever happened. Well, as we got older, we became more competitive. And we were always competitive around sports. We weren't very musical in my family. Go back to the earlier comments about naming. There wasn't a whole lot of creativity there, so we weren't very musical. And we certainly weren't academics. I mean, we weren't competing with one another to get the highest ACT score, I can promise you that. We weren't very artistic, but what we were was a sports-oriented, sports-minded group. And so we constantly tried to best one another in sports: baseball, basketball, and football. There was no soccer in the United States of America when I was a child. In fact, I don't think you could even buy a soccer ball in the United States of America when I was a child. If there had been soccer in the United States when I was a child, we would have been competitive in that. We would have done anything to best the other one in that. So when you have this high level of competition, sometimes things happen. Scuffles break out. Sometimes those un-Methodist words that Gene Glass was talking about a couple weeks ago will come flying out of your mouth. And sometimes we had real live fist fights where harm was intended. That's when it's really good to be the oldest and the biggest because you can impose your will on those other three punks. We had a lot of competition. We had a lot of scuffling. We had some fighting. We had some hostility in our family. I am not going to lie to you about that. Anybody that's grown up with siblings, I guess whether they're sisters or brothers, probably knows a little something about that. And I'm not going to lie to you. From time to time, one of us would jump up and say to the other one, "I am going to kill you before this day is over." But we didn't really mean it. We were just blowing off steam. We were just kind of letting our emotions out. But as much hostility as there was among the four of us, it could not hold a candle to the hostility that was resident among Jacob's sons, among Joseph and Reuben and those 12 guys. You know, they seriously were on the verge of killing him. They came that close to killing him. And I don't know if you noticed when I read the text or not, but it was Reuben, the oldest one, who stopped them from doing it. There's that responsibility. Whoa, wait a minute. You can't kill your brother. You got to back up from that. But they were about that close from killing Joseph. You know you've got a problem when plan B is selling your brother into slavery. You know you've got a problem when the moderate alternative is to sell your brother into slavery. You've got an issue at that point. And so the hostility that was resident in our family, our little family, couldn't hold a candle to the hostility that was resident among this group of folks. And if you read the story carefully, you begin to see how that hostility, that jealousy, that anger began to build. The first problem was that Israel, Jacob, showed favoritism toward Joseph. A couple weeks ago, Mike was preaching about the destructive effects in the life of a family when the parents show favoritism to one of the children. And that's exactly what we have here. Joseph was the son of Jacob's old age. And for some reason, that made made him his favorite in Jacob's eyes. Now, if I had a son of my old age, I don't think that would be the case. But that was the case with Jacob. So you have that. And the text says very clearly that the other 11 hated him as a result. And then you have Joseph, who is a bit of an upstart himself. He has these dreams of superiority over his brothers. And as I was reading this text and thinking about this and praying about this sermon, I was just thinking about what would have been like in my family if my youngest brother had come with this sort of dream. I mean, it's a level of arrogance that's pretty stunning. And it's not only one dream, then he comes with a second dream. And so you have the favoritism of Joseph and the favoritism of Jacob and the arrogance of Joseph. And after the dream, did you hear what the text said? Said it twice for emphasis. They hated him even more. And on top of all that, Joseph was a tattletale. So you can just see the hostility building. You can see the hatred building. And when you get to that level of hatred, the outcome almost always has to be destruction. And so when all was said and done and everything had been pondered, they decided to destroy their brother by selling him as a slave to the Ishmaelites. Now, we would like to think that that kind of thing doesn't happen in families. I think we would like to think that families, our families, all families, are havens of love and support and graciousness and forgiveness. But when we're honest, we know that is not always the case. Thanks be to God, it is often the case, but it is not always the case. Have you heard the news this morning? A father in Atlanta shot his wife, shot their children, and shot himself. And we hear those reports on the news more often than we would like to. The truth of the matter is that when you have hostility, and when you have jealousy, and when you have anger, which builds and builds and builds until it becomes hatred, destruction is going to break out somewhere, even when it happens in our families. And so as much as we would like to believe that this kind of thing can't happen in our families, we are confronted with it on a rather regular basis. It actually does. And so Jacob and Joseph and Reuben and all the rest of them are not all that different from what we see being lived out around us. It's kind of a simple principle, really. If someone acts with hostility toward you, and your response to that act of hostility is to be hostile back to that person, then what you have created is an escalating situation of hostility. Their hostility toward you, your hostility toward them, and it goes up, and it ratchets up, and it gets to the point where it's hatred, and it gets to the point sometimes, more times than we would like, that results in destruction. Once we get on the merry-go-round of hostility, it is incredibly difficult to get off of it. Once we get really seriously angry with one another in our families, it's very hard to calm that anger down. And once that hostility and anger get to the point of outright hatred, it's very hard to avoid some sort of destruction. Now, Jacob's family had a very difficult time getting off that merry-go-round of hostility. Very hard for them. But if you read the rest of the story, what you discover is that they did. They did get off the merry-go-round of hostility. And the way they were able to do that was when Joseph decided to treat those who had sold him into slavery. The way they did that was when Joseph decided to treat those who were willing to kill him with love and forgiveness. Now, Mike's going to talk about that next week, so I don't want to say a whole lot about it, except to say that when Joseph made that decision to treat those who had treated him so poorly with love and forgiveness, he himself was in a position where he could have done to them what they did to him, and he could have done even worse to them than what they had done to him. But Joseph's decision was to treat those who had been so hostile and so angry and so hateful toward him with love and grace and forgiveness. And because he did that, the family was able to get off that merry-go-round of hostility and live together peacefully to the end of Jacob's days. It's a pretty simple thing, it seems to me. To first of all realize that if all we ever do is treat one another with hostility and anger, all we're ever going to have is hostility and anger. For 4,000 years, God has been trying to teach us a better way. Read the Old Testament, read the New Testament, read the spiritual giants between the end of the New Testament and today. Over and over and over again, God raises up people and prophets. And certainly God raised up Jesus to teach us something very simple. When hostility comes your way, diffuse it with love. When anger comes your way, diffuse it with grace. The way to peace, the way to harmony is not through hostility and anger. The way to peace and harmony is through love and grace. For 4,000 years, God has been trying to teach us that. And that's what I think the story of Joseph and Jacob and that family is all about. It finally resolves in peace and harmony because one member of the family decided to return love and grace and forgiveness in the face of hostility and anger and destruction. It's a simple lesson that God has been trying to teach us. I'm not saying it's easy, but I am saying it's true. The question that you and I have to answer is this: who do we trust? Do we trust ourselves, or do we trust God? In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen.